Do you know when you're in the house and you kind of get into like doing your makeup and things get a bit out of hand? That is kind of what's happened here. I've used a lot of copper on my eyes and also used a red lip. It's clashing a lot more on the camera than what I thought it would. But I've been reading quite a lot recently. I have this thing where I can have a tracker in my bullet journal of stuff that I try to do on a regular basis. I guess you could call it a habit tracker, but I kind of don't like that as much. It's more like I see it, I guess, more as my goals and what I'm trying to achieve every month. So after doing my MA full-time and now doing my MLit part-time, I've really discovered the kind of benefit from writing and reading every day for pleasure. I think I read a lot academically, and when you're reading academically, I think you're reading to kind of extract knowledge, and then that affects how you consume pieces of writing, and you're always looking at things very critically, and you're kind of thinking, do I agree, do I disagree, what was their methods, things like that. And also when you write, you're building your arguments. At work, when I'm reading, I'm kind of reading what's going on in the industry, and then when I'm writing to convey information and my analysis in kind of as short and as concise ways as possible, and then I always have to do it through my business lens. Kind of that's the theory I apply is my business. So actually writing for me and writing for pleasure is something I get a lot out of. And that is something that I track in my bullet journal, and I try to read for 30 minutes every day. And it sounds like a lot when you start out, but actually you can do it so quickly. Quite often I actually do it in the morning before getting up, because 30 minutes just flies by and you can do it in your bed. And I think that I get a lot out of reading how other people write, how they present stories and ideas, and and because I read fiction, I think it's just nice to exercise that. And also I think it makes you a lot more articulate as a person and exposes you to different worlds and different cultures and just different ways of speaking and things like that. So I think that's really important. Because I've been tracking this, I've actually been reading and writing a lot more, and that means I've been getting through a lot more books, as you might have noticed, because there's been more and more book videos here. And the book that I'm talking about today is very different for me. It is The Purple Hibiscus. So The Purple Hibiscus is by an author who I just can't pronounce, and I really don't want to do a disservice and pronounce it wrongly throughout this whole video, so I'm going to do it once now, and then I'm just going to refer to the author. So Chimamanda Adichie. So I really don't know. Ngozi Adichie, maybe. I really struggle. Because this is quite a different book for me, I've not really got book club questions prepared about it. I think that'd be quite naive of me. I'm definitely not an expert in this field. So instead I'm just going to talk about the book, what I thought about it, what I liked about it. Obviously this review will contain spoilers, bear that in mind. But I'd really like to hear your thoughts down below, and I really appreciate critical thoughts about my opinions. You know, a little bit of healthy debate is always welcome. I read basically a lot of stories about white people written by white people, and if I'm straying outside of that, I tend to read Middle Eastern stuff. And that is a fault, and that is something that I'm really trying to remedy, because I know that's a really bad way to approach fiction. Reading Purple Hibiscus, I was like, God, I wish I knew more about this culture, and this is why I should read more non-European books and authors and stories set in Africa. The first thing I've noted down here is how I kind of got a sense of this book. I wasn't the target audience, and I'm not saying I should be the target audience for any book. There's plenty of books I am the target audience of. I think there was a lot of unfamiliarity for me in this book. I found it, you know, it's an unfamiliar country, Nigeria, going through a really unique situation, and one that I'm very privileged to have never had to go through, you know, civil unrest and political unrest where there is civilian risk, and I think and it is done through the lens of a teenage girl and her coming of age story, which is great, by the way. It's set in an unfamiliar country. There is a lot of unfamiliar cultural aspects for me, and I really enjoyed learning about them. You know, just even the descriptions of the houses, description of schooling, the description of the village life, and how you can have almost a benefactor of the community, and how one person can be so central to a whole community, I think is really interesting, and I found that really interesting. And also the religious aspect was quite unfamiliar for me, because I'm not religious, I'm atheist. I was brought up in a very religiously open household, you know, and I've studied a lot of different religions, and I love that aspect. But I think like a lot of people actually, I haven't actually spent that much time studying Christianity, and especially how Christianity is expressed and its place in the community in Africa. And I think that is something that's really interesting, and I think the role of Christianity, and especially Catholicism from a geopolitical point of view, is really interesting. And it's really important, especially when the growth areas for the church, the Christian church, are in Southern America and Africa. So I think it is really interesting to see the role of religion in those cultures. So I really enjoyed getting that exposure from the book. From a stylistic point of view, I really like the style of writing. There's an easy pace to it. There is kind of an understated confidence in the writing. It's relaxed, but you can also tell that it's quite important. You know, the way that ideas are conveyed, the interactions, especially between the main character Kambili and the love interest of the young priest, I think is really just thoughtful, and it's chilled out, and it's got a kind of relaxed pace to it, like I said, but there is a kind of underlying tension, whether that's underlying tension in the community with the political unrest that's going on, or underlying tension within the family, and you know, whether that's extended family moving to America, or whether that is the abuse environment within the family home. On the back of the book, I've just noticed there's a review which really resounds with me. It says there's a quiet confidence about the writing which is very attractive. It isn't showy, it isn't brash, but on the contrary, both captivating and mature. And I think that is what sums it up. And although it is a coming of age story, and there is what you might say is quite predictable elements of that. You've got a girl who's turning into a woman, it's her kind of self-discovery, it's interacting with a man. How it's addressed is very mature, and it's doing those themes, but there's also a kind of innocence to it, and I think that is really, really enjoyable and really well done. How it's dealt with as well is quite unpredictable. You almost expect there to be a kind of sordid love affair aspect to it, and there's not. It is kept very thoughtful. It's all about thoughts and feelings, and you know, those thoughts and feelings are actually explored through dialogue, you know, whether it's the teasings of the cousins, you know, it's very cleverly done, that it's very much, you know, you're show and not tell, and I really like that. I'm just realising how disorganised this review is, and I think it is because I'm not that comfortable with the book, and I don't want to overstep my mark and kind of make grand statements, because I'm not that comfortable with it, because I don't understand it as well as what I should do, and I think that's good. It's good to read things that you don't understand and try and get, you know, more familiar with them and understand more about different cultures. I did really enjoy the book. You know, I thought it was addictive. I couldn't put it down. I thought that all the characters were really interesting, as you know, especially the supporting cast, and I think they were really interesting, but I would like them to have been fleshed out a little bit more, especially the mum and the mother figure. I think that if she kind of got fleshed out as much as the aunt figure, I think it would have been really good. And just to understand, you know, how she feels about her children going to stay with the auntie, how does she feel going through miscarriages, how does she feel being in an abusive relationship with an important, well-respected man of the community. And I think it is explored to a degree, and you know, I guess it's one of these things that there are generational gaps in the family, and that is kind of, you know, and maybe that's why it's shown like that, that the child doesn't understand the mother's generation, and, you know, especially doesn't understand the grandfather's generation and belief system in there. So it's another gap of, you know, disconnect. So maybe that's why the characters aren't fleshed out as much, as, you know, to show that there is this level of disconnect and misunderstanding between the generations. But that's just something that I would have liked to have got more out of it. Another note on characterization is that I really liked how they were complex characters. You know, no one was all good, no one was all bad. The figure of Papa is obviously the best demonstration of this. He's a revered man within the community, within the faith. You know, politically he's trying to do what's seen as good, and what as Western norms we would say is, yes, he's standing up for the right things. But then obviously he is in a household where he's quite abusive, and actually though you can't even split it off, that disconnect between a public and a private persona, because there is contradictions even within that. You know, as a private figure he isn't all bad. You know, there's a lot of self-doubt, there's a lot of, you can tell there's a lot of weight that he puts on his private persona. It's not like, you know, sometimes in domestic abuse storytelling you have the public and private split, and, you know, one's good and one's bad. I think that isn't the case. There is the complexity, and the good can be seen in both the public persona and the private persona, and I thought that was really well done. Like I said before, I did really enjoy the religious themes throughout the book, and learning a little bit more about how you almost have the pagan aspects of culture and how that interacts with the Catholic aspects of culture, and how this can be conservative or liberal, and how they can mesh or not mesh. In, you know, Papa's household, you know, paganism is seen as backwards, and it's, you know, it's heretical actually. You know, he goes so far as to not even have any contact with his own father because of it. So basically I really like this book, but as you can probably tell, it kind of raised a lot more questions for me, and it's something that I want to explore a lot more, and I want to read more African authors and more novels set in African countries and cultures, and just learn about it, because I think that is something that's really interesting, and it's completely my own doing for not exploring it sooner. So what do you think? Let me know what you think down below, and if you agreed with any of my points, if you disagreed. The next book that I'm going to talk about, if you want to read, is The Dream Merchant by Isabel Hoving, which is a young adult fantasy novel, and it's a thick one. So yeah, if you want to keep up with me and what I'm reading, that's what's next. But if not, I'm definitely going to read more of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's work. I'm the worst at pronouncing. Okay, bye.